Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just.
And then it's so funny because I've not worn a mask in forever, and so like walking in here, I still have my we got extras out there.
Yeah, but most stores, I mean, it's
Well,
pretty.
they don't even care now. It's like your kids. My kids aren't vaccinated
Yeah.
and stuff. They don't see ACS not wearing them, so
Yeah.
they're like, fine, we don't think to bring them for them, and we've not ever had.
Kevin, Ron, you ready?
Yeah, it's.
That just being in Idaho this last weekend.
Caleb, you good?
Okay. I bring apologies for being a few minutes late from President Laura, and so in her absence, temporary absence, I will call the meeting to order and open the meeting at 1 p.m. on Monday, the 21st of June, and this is the Wenatchee School District Strategic Planning Workshop.
Thank you, Martin. Welcome board, community. Excited to be here today to share the current draft of our strategic plan, again, with the board and the community. Diane and I will kind of tag team this. Please feel free within the workshop format, stop us, ask questions in a moment. It'll probably make more sense to the community and to others as we're asking those questions. So our purpose today is to share who has been involved, the update itself, the review of the draft, because and I will get into this a little bit, and then the timeline. But I have to say that every time we've had a feedback loop built in, better information, it just continues to build upon our plan. So I'm so grateful for all those who've currently touched the plan and those who will continue to give feedback on the plan.
So what is a strategic plan? In essence, it is the process of setting goals, deciding what actions we're going to take, and then aligning our resources so that we can proceed with those actions. For us, a strategic plan is all about simplicity. That's really a key component of that. Our plan will be focused, it will be concise, it will be attainable in 5 years, and provide consistent monitoring and evaluation. There's evidence that one-page plans, or what we're calling framework, really lay out a clearly focused, simple enough plan that everybody can understand what we're talking about, and they can also understand their role as it pertains to the strategic plan. Wenatchee School District Strategic Plan is intentional. It is not by accident, it is by design. So kind of going back in time, our focus really has been on, since 2019, in July, when Dr. Gordon arrived as the new superintendent in Wenatchee, has really been about building a foundation through discovery. I took a quick screenshot of a presentation slide that we gave to the board a year ago about this time, where we were presenting, kind of wrapping up our strategic, our superintendent's transition plan. So I pulled out a few key facts that I'm just going to review. During that time, we called it our listening and learning phase, and it was really an opportunity for us to transition Superintendent Gordon into the community, really get him out there to meet stakeholders in our community and ask some questions about what was working, what was not working, and really be self-reflective as a district to learn about ourselves and learn about some of what we needed to do better. During that period of time, we met over 2,000 stakeholders through a variety of different ways, large groups, small groups, community interactions. We had 75 plus student, parent, and staff listening sessions where we're actually going out into our school buildings or bringing groups of students in just to listen to them and ask those same questions. Also, we had 63 community and school speaking events or visits where we were in the classroom. Dr. Gordon had the opportunity to shadow students at Orchard Middle School. That's that small little picture down there at the bottom, and really just spend some time talking with folks about who he was and also listening to them about what some of their concerns were and what some of their goals and values were for the district. Also, to follow up that listening and learning process, we conducted a stakeholder survey. We had a little over 1,300 people respond to that survey. And this was an opportunity for folks to share with us what their priorities were for Wenatchee School District. It also gave them the opportunity to assign us a letter grade. That's something we're familiar with in education. And so we asked the community to rank us. Where did we fall? And we earned a C. It also gave us an opportunity to confirm the board's values. The board had spent a significant amount of time that transcended over 2 boards to be clear, at really honing in on what their values were, and they wanted the opportunity to really test drive those in the community. Those were validated, and those 3 values are listed there: excellence in learning, equity, and accountability. These are really key components in the absence of a current strategic plan. These board values that you created and that the community validated really have been the driving force to help guide us through a very unprecedented year. But also, again, in that absence of a strategic plan, these were really our guideposts. In addition to that, we also asked people to participate in a SWOT analysis. And what that is it's a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats conversation. I just listed our strengths and weaknesses there to kind of give you a sense of what those look like. And again, this is what our stakeholder community groups, our parents, our students, and our staff said were our strengths and were our weaknesses. This whole discovery process went well over a year. So we had many opportunities to just hear from folks and really do a lot of data collection. This data collection was the kind of the starting point for our work as it related to the strategic plan.
Diana? Yes. Oh, sorry. I just want to say thank you for taking us back because it seems like it was an eternity ago, but really it was, a little bit over a year ago. Yeah. So I appreciate because again, it seems like it's been a while and we dealt with a lot of things this past year. But so just providing a foundation of how we got there, a reminder of how we got here, I really appreciate that.
And it was really good reflection for us too, because we did a lot of listening and learning pre-pandemic, but we've also done a lot of listening and learning during the pandemic. That's really kind of helped us think through our strategic planning process. But all that foundation work was done very intentionally. It wasn't just getting Dr. Gordon out there into the community. It was really thoughtful in that we wanted to self-reflect. This was an opportunity for us to rethink who we are as a Wenatchee School District and open that door for people to give us some real honest feedback. And they pulled no punches. We told them very honestly, please tell us what you think. We don't hold back. This is your chance to really share with us. What are we doing really well, but where can we grow? So just more points of reflection. This is really kind of the full strategic planning timeline. So we talked about, Dr. Gordon's first day here, July 1st, 2019, is really when we started the work of the discovery. October 2019 through January of 2020, that's the work that you did. That's the work that the board did of defining values. That was hard work. We had many workshops, if you recall, going through and really defining those values, identifying the values, but also defining those values. And again, those have been critical to the district in navigating some really difficult, challenging situations. It's given us clarity and guidance. July 2019 through June 2020, we already talked about the listening and learning kind of approach, those interviews and meetings. We followed that up in January and February with that stakeholder survey and SWOT analysis. We came back to the board June 2020, about this time last year, and that's where we gave that full report on the superintendent's transition plan and what that looked like. Moving into November of 2020, we then had a call for submission of names. We asked people to throw their hat in the ring to participate in our stakeholder strategic planning team. We had specific kind of categories of individuals, and you helped define who those individual categories were, from making sure that we have representation of our special ed parents, our migrant bilingual parents, community and business partners, students, staff, administrators, etc. So we asked for people to participate in that. We were able to form that committee starting in December of 2020, and we have been meeting twice a month since that time. And the goal of that committee was really to develop the framework recommendation and promise statement that we'll be sharing with you in draft format here in a few minutes. In April of 2021, The strategic plan committee team came to the board and presented kind of their perspective on the process that the district has gone through, and really the thinking and the work that the committee has done, the difficult conversations that we've had, how they've grappled with some really challenging topics. That they came forward and shared their truths, shared their experience with the public and the board at that time. May 2021, so just last month, we created a large district work group that began the task of developing recommendation action steps for each priority in our strategic plan framework. And again, we'll get into that here in a few minutes. Again, that was difficult work. This boardroom was full of people having more challenging conversations at a practitioner level. How are we going to carry out the work? We also had a small district group that took some of that large group thinking and were able to further distill it down and put that into practice. And then June 2021, just last week, we were able to meet with our principals now that school has ended and really give them some thoughtful time to look through some of the draft practices that we had put in place for each one of those action items. We also asked them to just reflect on some of the larger pieces in the framework and give us feedback on those as well. So just going back to what Dr. Gordon said just a few minutes ago, there's a lot of fingerprints on this plan up to this point, and a lot of people that have been able to provide us with feedback, and it just keeps getting better as we move along. So we'll end with this last part as well, but for now, our goal is for next steps is to finalize that framework, really make sure it's tight and we're ready to move forward with that. When we return in the fall, because this is more of a marathon and not a sprint, we want to have the right plan with the right people involved in the plan. We will continue working on our action steps when our building leaders come back in early August. And then we'll also have an opportunity for staff to provide additional feedback when they return as well. And our goal is to have a strategic plan launched somewhere in that September, October timeframe. That's when the framework is done and all of the action steps, key performance indicators, and all of those things are really dialed in and complete. In addition to that, once the plan is done, we hope to roll out a new brand in November that will really help support that overall strategic plan and new vision, new promise statement for the Wenatchee School District. So just to give you kind of a quick look at who's been involved at this point in time, our strategic planning team is all listed there, so you can see the representatives that have served in that capacity. We also had our district large work group. Cabinet has been involved in looking at this, as well as our principal team. So this is kind of the large summary of all the individuals that have been involved at a very kind of down and dirty level. We're starting to look critically at a lot of these pieces and begin to develop those frameworks and then talk through those practices and action steps.
You've seen our promise. We promise to build a foundation of diversity, equity, and inclusion from which each student emerges future ready. What I'm hopeful you'll see today is how the promise comes to life through our action steps and our practices that we will be introducing today. Our values, as Diana spoke about, building the knowledge, understanding, and skills of all to achieve at the highest levels. Dismantling practices, policies, and procedures that create barriers and rebuild a system that meets the individual needs of each student and staff. Setting expectations and holding ourselves to the highest standards of integrity, learning, fiscal responsibility, and transparency. I also hope that you'll be able to see those values in the action steps and in the practices that we have. Our priorities, again, these were board selected: the thriving environment, welcoming spaces where all individuals flourish, are seen and valued, feel safe, and know they belong. Opportunities, equitable access to high quality academic, extracurricular, and real world experiences. Our partnerships, trusting relationships between students, staff, families, schools, and the community that enhance student well-being and success. Again, these will be a major component of the action steps and the work that we're going to be doing. You will see this work tied to our values, tied to our promise statement. And that's been the goal, the entire process, is for people to see a through line from the promise statement to the actual work happening within our classrooms, within our schools, within our community, and that have these big outcomes for students. One of the things that we learned was we had to make sure that we were defining our definition, WSD's definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this, again, has been really thoughtful through a number of different feedback loops to really get to this point. Diversity is the range of human differences and experiences in individuals and groups. Equity is providing necessary support, access, and opportunities for each student to be future ready, regardless of race, economics, and other differences, while at the same time identifying and eliminating barriers that have prevented full access for all students. During last week's strategic plan committee meeting, somebody asked us a great question. Why did you highlight race and economics as an equity topic as opposed to just saying differences? And I loved it because in our district, there are differences, and there are differences along the lines of economics. And if you are a Latino student in our district and a white Caucasian student, our data has been very clear for a number of years. There's a significant difference in overall student performance amongst those two groups of students. Those are areas we have to close. Those are our responsibility to see our students, to see our system, and to say, we're going to tackle this because they're significant, sometimes in the 30 to 40% difference between how our Latino students overall at a grade level are performing versus white students at that grade level. Inclusion is respecting and valuing each person for who they are, where they are, and their individual aspirations. So really proud of our definitions. And again, these may not be Webster's definitions, but they're WSD's definitions to help people understand where we're going with our promise statement. So big six, these are the overarching outcomes we're seeking for our students. We really leaned into the research throughout this whole strategic plan. And I think that's really important. The idea that what Diana spoke about earlier, the simplicity of it from having it down to a page of what are we doing? What are we going for? There's Follin, Doug Reeves, Schmoker, tons of other researchers who are very clear when they look at school districts and quite honestly, industry as well. And when you kind of weigh the prettiness factor, which may have those 20-page document versus a really thoughtful, precise, concise plan, and they see student outcomes, they always lean towards those plans that are so just very intentional, very concise, and direct about what they're doing and what we're trying to achieve for our kids. So if we were to do this, our plan, what we would see in 5 years are these big 6 student outcomes. Experience high quality instruction. Students are participating in and receiving grade level standard or beyond instruction and assignments. This is huge. When you talk about an equity conversation in the area of schools, what we know for over 20 years from Katie Haycock and the Educational Trust Foundation and countless other researchers is the work that students are given is the level in which our students rise to. In many school districts, and generally many school districts that are a little bit more impoverished or have a higher Latino, Black, Indigenous student population, what we see consistently are lower standards, lower expectations, which correlate into lower assignments, lower expectations for assignments. So I think we've heard, one of the things that we really want to make sure that every classroom is this classroom that has that standards, that grade level standards and assignments and beyond within those classrooms. 2, experience high levels of social and emotional support. We saw for this last year and 4 months the incredible importance of caring and seeing for each other, being there for each other, and being there for our students inside our classrooms and outside our classrooms and within our community. Again, these are research-based. Students know they belong, are valued, and they have multiple adults and peers that they are connected with. This next one, reading on grade level by 3rd grade and beyond. 3rd graders will read on grade level. Interesting enough, Karen Chenoweth, who's an academic researcher, just is releasing a brand new book out called School Districts That Succeed. What are those school districts that are transforming outcomes for students? Guess what she says? She literally speaks about the reading of science, the structured literacy in which we're doing, the importance of being so explicit with our instruction. We've seen it time and time again. The 1990 Reading Commission, the National Reading Commission, said these same things. But time and time again, I love that the research keeps coming back to, you have to have high quality staff who have a deep knowledge of instructional outcomes, and that's what we're doing. You'll see that later as well. Algebra ready. This was a great conversation within our organization. Because what we know, algebra is the gatekeeper to college and beyond. But what we also know, this is not just a 9th grade thing. This is a K-12 thing. That our early students in the areas of numeracy understand numeracy, they understand number sense, they start to understand what a number means, that the number 5 has a lot of different meanings to it, and can they pull apart a number 5? That's really what number sense is on a very generic level. But also algebra is about fractions. And if we don't have that idea of fractions down, you're not going to get the idea of algebra. So we really have this pre-K-12 thinking in all these. That's why the grading or reading is beyond. It's not just we stopped here, whoo, we got it taken care of, we're done. Math and literacy are foundation to what we do. It's why it's called out here. On track for graduation. 9th graders will be on track to graduate on time. This will be the state's definition. Because one thing we didn't want was having a WSD definition and then people going onto the state website and looking up on-time graduation, and we weren't matching those pieces. Involved in extracurricular and real-world experiences. Again, sound like a broken record, but when we know when students are engaged beyond the classroom, how impactful that is for our students of all ages and those real-world experiences. We knew from the former strategic plan how important hands-on learning was and still is for our students. So how giving kids those experiences, really around levels, around those elementary levels, around the middle school level, and around the high school level, making sure our kids are involved. So these are our big 6 student outcomes that we're really excited to kind of finalize our framework. So the framework is a promise, the values, the priorities in the big 6. That's kind of that's the big story going in. The next part we're going to share with you is how you get there. This all sounds good, but it's the work behind and the measurements behind what we're doing. So I'll just kind of stop there for a moment. Martin?
Yeah,
You look like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I do. I think this is a fulcrum, and I have about 3 or 4 comments, some of them not very important. In terms of clarity of language, I'm not fussing about wordsmithing or grammar. And that first one, I think will read much more clearly if you say receiving instruction and assignments at grade level or beyond. It just eliminates a tiny bit of confusion.
Okay.
The second thing, knowing that we are working on mathematics, having started on literacy, is I am hoping that we will treat mathematics as a more integrated discipline and not in silos. So I would suggest the group really try to think ahead a little bit. And we're in bed, when we say algebra ready, we're going back to putting little barricades artificially around parts of mathematics. And maybe there's a better way of, I know the objective, but
Yep.
maybe we need 340 for that. Out of interest, and this is just an inconsequential thing, the Economist newspaper's last week's edition had a 2-page article saying very much the same thing as the literacy program that's recently introduced in the Wenatchee School District, that it is the effective way. So here you have an economic and business world-class newspaper endorsing basically the approach that this district had started. So I like to look at input that comes from outside academia, and it's I thought I'd mention that one. And then I guess the last thing is, as you're working on this and continue to work, we've talked about before, the group of grappling with how to measure. And I think this is a good point now where you're saying in benchmark style where you want to get to, and then work later on how to measure it.
I really appreciate those comments. We'll take those, because that's been something we've really worked on just from your first one, the language and being precise with our language. How are we super clear? So I appreciate that feedback. And it is good to hear that other outside organizations beyond the academic area are speaking about the science of reading and structured literacy and the importance behind it. So I love those comments. So thank you. Others? You don't have to. Forcing you to.
I had a comment on the on track for graduation. So you have 9th graders will be on track to graduate on time. So that's the first year of high school. So maybe you could just kind of expand on that, whether it's about choosing a pathway or because they're just beginning their high school career.
Yeah.
So it might be a little, you might have questions in people's minds if you could expand on it.
Perfect. And one of the things that we will have on there is that clickable link to what is the Washington State definition of on track graduation. So that will be there. So nobody's misinformed as to what it is, but good feedback.
I don't mind adding something on what Michelle said, is I've learned from the district and educators, the earlier the students start thinking about the endpoint and the requirements of graduation. So I'm pleased to see that it's 9th grade, not 10th or 11th. And what I hear is that people are working to get that thinking into middle school even, because you can lose opportunities really early. So that was just, I think, and you talked about this being pre-K to 12, and although these are and loaded in terms of the outcome, they have to, their success can depend on the early start.
Couldn't have said it better. That's literally what we're trying to do. And one of the reasons that every staff member sees themselves in our plan and they see how they connect to these big 6. That's our goal, is exactly what you said, Martin, that this is not laid on the stairs of our high school friends only, because oftentimes you'll see plans like that where it is a kind of high school centric plan, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're saying everybody has a role in this to do this exceptionally well.
So I do have a comment, and it's going back to the slide before this.
Oh.
The definition of DEI,
Oh.
the one before.
Yeah,
that.
there we go.
So there's been such a, equity has become such a buzzword. And I see that in the definition, you clarify that, but I'm wondering if there's something that we can do to dispel any rumors or incorrect, I'm going to say, misguided thinking around what we mean by equity. There's lots of rumors flying around out there, and
you know, that's gonna be at the forefront of our plan. So I think we ought to be clear up front and maybe think about rewording some of that, something, just.
Yeah, I think the little that I hear from some other people is this or the emails that we get, is this conversation around equal versus equity.
Correct.
And for me, it really is important that the school district is focused on equity around supporting each student where they're at. And really literally exactly how we're phrasing this. The necessary support, access, and opportunities for each student. And I want that to be clear. That is, wherever you're at in the academic or behavioral continuum, from our students in those AP courses to our kids and just the regular core classes to our kids who may need different support, that each student is given the support, access, and opportunities to be future ready. That's what we're about. Equal, quite honestly, I think when people really start to think about equal in a school district, it would be the exact opposite that people would want. Equal means everyone gets the same. Everyone gets the same thing. And that would mean the elimination of many different programs. Just for instance, just our AP, because that's not equal. So equal would be everybody being in just core outcomes, core classrooms. And those are those pieces that we really want to make sure what happens from a program standpoint. But most importantly, how do we support each kid to be that future ready with the understanding each of us are different. Now, is this a big lift? Absolutely. This is a huge lift to bring equity into our district and really to look at kids as that individual human.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, but you know, without your lengthy explanation, people aren't gonna see that, and I really don't even think they're gonna understand it from digging into these words. Using examples and weaving those into what people are gonna see are at the forefront is not, equity doesn't always mean, you know, what we're giving kiddos to move up from the bottom. It's also, if reaching your full potential is sort of the overarching piece, then providing AP, college in the classroom, those kinds of things are equitable. But I just really feel like since we're getting all kinds of emails and stopped on the street and everything, that making that clear is super important. And there are school districts in our state, Mercer Island being one, that is eliminating AP for this very reason. So it really comes down to huge impacts to students if this.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that's why we want to, quite honestly, why we slowed things down. Exactly what, sorry, it's at times a research beat. Morris in 1975 coined a term around meaning making. He's kind of a change thinker, how to implement change. And one of the biggest barriers to truly doing change well is creating deep meaning making, meaning what do these terms actually stand for? But more so than Paul Gordon, leader, boards know what it means, that our job is to go out and really be talking about these things. And it's why we spent so much time with our principals, APs, directors last Thursday. We're doing exactly what you were talking about, that we're creating this understanding. So our organization understands what this is, and then we're able to continue those ripples. And you're right, Laura, also the stories. Telling those stories when we're communicating our plan out. What does this actually look like, sound like, and feel like in action? So people know those pieces. It is the organization. It can't be on one communication, one person. It is a continued conversation around these three words and around our plan. That to me, when I look at the research, that's the one that says that's the game changer. It is having those conversations.
It is, and also, you know, one of the other issues that's swirling around and I thought was a put to bed issue already is, some of the fall sex education curriculum that's resurfacing now. And so explaining it one time doesn't, it has to be there at the forefront so that in a moment, without a lengthy explanation, persons can look at the top level of the strategic plan and see what we need without, in clear, simple.
I love it.
Equity means AP, equity means IEP, equity means,
West Side.
it means college in the classroom, it means, and the diverse things that it does entail, because it can be a little bit deceiving if people want to twist.
Yep.
the
I love
words.
that, Laura. I appreciate it. And I love just what are those programs tied to equity? Because people get that. People get West Side. People get AP. People get having IEPs, individual education plans. But you're right, on the surface, because it at times, well, it seems like everything anymore becomes politicized. And that's really what we're trying to do is exactly what you were talking
We're
about.
really, speak to, this just came to me, like speaking to how equity is actually benefiting and touching more students than it's not. If we
I love that.
think about all the programs,
Oh,
every student is different, so if we're talking about equity, whatever of these they're involved in, I bet if we looked at the numbers, we would see that very few students aren't involved in something that's providing equitable education.
Yes, I agree, I agree, but I also don't think we should shy away from it as being one, I mean, these are equity is one of the values that we as a board chose. But reminding, our community, our parents that, it's free and reduced lunch, but now it's all free, services such as the highly capable program. So it's just about not shying away from the word, but educating our parents, our community. Because as soon as you shy away from it, then it just continues to have the misinformation, misinterpretation of the word.
those ongoing conversations, I believe is one of the most impactful things, that we continue to build that same consistent understanding of the words with different stories behind them, with different programs tied to it, with different outcomes that kids are achieving through that equitable lens.
And just to add, what we have been doing, not only as a district, but just in general in education, hasn't been working so well. For a lot of our students. So why wouldn't we start giving them the supports all of our students need, outside of what our protected groups that we're already providing, special education, highly capable. So again, I think this is great. Education, which is something we do here, will be a huge component as we move forward with this.
Great conversation.
Oh, I just have a quick question. So, at some point for the strategic plan, are we gonna have kind of like a mini slideshow or something on? Because I think these definitions are great, for people who want to know and understand, because not everybody understands what the difference between equality and equity is, just as a starter point, right? So, I think these are great definitions. Again, you didn't just pull them out of a
No.
dictionary, but they're very specific of what we're trying to communicate, of how we want these interpreted. And, but I think we have to be it just has to be very visible. And we do need to educate folks who are willing to be educated. Some people may not be willing to do a slideshow, but I think if we had a mini slideshow for folks, that would be great. The video.
Yeah, if I could just
Please.
jump into, I agree with what Laura was saying. If we could include a little bit more meat to what is equity, how does that become this equity equality issue? I think those examples that you pointed to, the IEP, just adding some, for examples, would help add meaning to it. The other thing, not to get too wordsmithy, I liked what you said, with respect to the second sentence. I think that the way I read it could trigger some more of this debate, and if there's a way to maybe soften it, I like what you said, in terms of continuing to have dialogue. So if we said something like, well, at the same time, continuing to have open dialogue to identify actual or perceived barriers that, and encourage full access for all students or something. Like I can see how that reads a little to this narrative of, what's off the media and hyped and whatnot. So just a thought, not married to it, but something like that. But I liked your statement of continuing to have open dialogue versus just the straight identifying and eliminating, which sounds so finite that we all agree that there are things we need to address.
Yeah.
But being so, that there are in fact issues that we're aware of and have ignored, I don't like that suggestion, but I like the idea that we are, as part of our equity, constantly engaged in a dialogue to see what are the issues, why are people feeling this way, and what can we do to encourage and make sure students are accessing these programs.
I appreciate good feedback, Martin.
I wasn't going to say anything on equity, but I think Laura has a valid point. That
Laura, open that one up.
No, she opened up, I think, a pretty constructive pathway.
I do, so.
I felt this was good enough. But if you look at the first and the third one, diversity and inclusion, the one thing I liked about, one of the many things I liked about the strategic plan is it focused on individuals of all kinds. And that's a difficult word to play politics with. And I think in diversity and inclusion, you have very, very simple statements that don't have emotive words in them. If you take the equity one, Laura's idea is take characteristics and examples to the end of the statement as such as, and then you can either have a short or a long version or a video or something else. So here I'll sort of stick my neck out of it. Equity is providing the necessary support and access for each individual student to have the opportunity to be future ready, regardless of, and eliminate barriers regardless of such as with examples of everything from, what all kinds of students of all natures need. That's just, I think that could be a good presentation that other people could work on.
I appreciate it. And this is what I meant at the beginning. And meant it so sincerely. Every time we've done feedback loops, this is a feedback loop, we keep getting better. Every time, different, more eyes keep getting us. So I appreciate those pieces, and we're taking those pieces in, and we'll make those adjustments, and why it's still a draft, and why we're not here today to do any final approval. We're working, we're close. It's getting dang close, but these kind of conversations are super important for us. So we have a plan that is embraced by our entire community, and that's what I also hear, that it's, and a piece that you wrote to me, Martin, a few weeks ago, around making sure that we're bringing people together to do right by each student. That's really, when this community comes together, there's not much that will stop it. So I appreciate the feedback.
We're looking to simplify it, just.
Oh, sorry.
So in, again, under equity, instead of regardless of blah, that we said regardless of background. That is a very general statement, but we know that you're saying there's lots of things, right? There's race, there's socioeconomics, there's learning abilities, there's just so many factors that come into play. So I wonder if it might be less divisive. If we had just something that just simplifies that a little bit.
I think that's a good reminder, because I think equity is oftentimes associated with race.
Yes.
And it has absolutely nothing to do with race in general. So I don't know, having it in there is, I saw it as an education piece, regardless of race, but I also see Michelle's point, because I think that's the misinterpretation. Well, only 52% of our students in our district are going to have that access to that.
I love it. Great,
Let's-
great board.
Can we quantify it? I mean, for my own edification, I would love to see it quantified. Not necessarily in the books.
Yeah, in this
In the
budget.
document, but I would like to know. How
Similar,
many students are participating in some program that is beyond basic education?
we can quantify that.
Because if we're talking about equal, then we took all those things away. How many students would we be impacting? I bet it's the majority.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Great feedback. Great feedback. Great feedback. Thank you. See.
And you gave me a really great segue.
Like we set you up for this.
This always happens with this group. One of the things that we're working on as part of our kind of launch of the framework is a messaging platform that will go along with this. So kind of a guide to the strategic plan. So to really help not only the board talk about the plan, but also our leaders talk about the plan and really understand that. So we'll have some real key messages that can include some examples and different things that we can all use just to help better connect those dots between, you know, the district's definition of DEI and those student outcomes. So, and making sure that we're really clear with that. So those are pieces that we will be putting together that we'll have as part of our toolkit to really support the work of the strategic plan and its rollout, so everybody can feel equipped and ready. So going back to the work and how we really approach the strategic plan, we've taken a different angle at looking at each one of the priorities and associated action steps. And this really came out of a small group of staff in talking with them about how do we do this work? How do we dig into this big framework and really put meaning behind it? And also, how do we create space where everyone can see their role and what they're accountable for in the plan, and that we're really, really clear. So we use what we're calling lenses to really help guide our practices. And we have 3 different lenses that you'll see here in the next several slides. Our staff/teacher, school/building leadership practices, and then district practices. And these are really meant to be, this is what staff and teachers will do in the classroom or on the bus or in the lunchroom to really achieve that action step for that objective. Same thing with our building. These are the practices that our buildings and our school leaders will do. These are the practices that the district will do, all to support that one priority and that action step. So these are the lenses that we're looking through in carrying out our overall strategic plan. Great, so we're gonna just dive right into our priorities, and we're gonna start with thriving environment. And just as a refresher, thriving environment is welcoming spaces where where all individuals flourish, are seen and valued, feel safe, and know they belong. This is kind of a quick look at the framework. So you can see that priority there of thriving environment. And the first action step under thriving environment is supporting the social and emotional well-being of people with healthy and supportive spaces, both emotional, online, and in person. So you can see the 3 lenses there. For our staff and teacher lens, they're going to be teaching and modeling behaviors based on district values through planned social emotional learning, instruction, and support. School and building leaders will be supporting staff collaboration time and resources for social and emotional learning. District leadership and organizational practices will be supporting and modeling behaviors based on our values, overseeing implementation and professional development of social and emotional learning and restorative justice practices. This is just a good example of what that looks like. And you will see some crossover in some of these where you might see those practices being the same or similar in one or more of these different lenses. Moving on to the next one, action step 2 under thriving environment, develop facilities and operations that reinforce equitable learning and opportunities. So for our staff and teachers, providing student spaces that are safe for all, they're accessible, welcoming, and represent our diverse community. We're using technology and equipment in order to increase access for students in the community. For our building and leader practice, ensure staff has the training and support to use classroom resources and technology to ensure each student is future ready. Ensure school facilities are safe, accessible, welcoming, and represent our diverse community. Again, you can see some redundancy there, very intentional. District leadership and organizational practices, maintain facilities that are safe, accessible, welcoming, and represent our diverse multilingual community. Equip and plan for facilities equitably. And the third one under driving environment, hiring staff that reflect our student body. Staff and teacher practices are advocate for diversity both in skill and background during the hiring process. School building and leadership practices seek to build diversity in skill and background during the hiring process. Collaborate with teams, teachers, to have a clear understanding of what qualified and diverse candidates would be. The district level, it's providing guidance and professional development to cultivate the recruitment and hiring of a more diverse staff. Identify current staff for professional growth that reflect our student body.
So one of the things that we'll be working on, and we're going to be drafting over July with cabinet, are performance indicators. How would we measure these? How would we build on these to see where are we going, what are we doing, are we accomplishing this? So that's our work over the next few weeks into July, and then getting that out for our staff to give us feedback on that as well. So these two will have performance indicators to make sure that we're moving toward our big six. So opportunities.
So can I go back?
Please,
to
please, please.
Item 3.
This one?
This one, yeah. Because there's something that's a little more specific than this that really hits me. We have a reservoir of people for history that is deficit of teachers like me. And it's going to take time to build that. And our conventional professional requirements often exclude people. There are methods of including unconventional backgrounds, either by transfer of profession or by taking people through an internship that be very, very successful in various ways. I'm wondering whether something about that very specific, I know it's there in general, but it's because we have a disadvantage of the reservoir and the criteria. Maybe we need to say, we're going to go unconventional and look at these avenues as something specific.
No, I really like that, because it is hard. I mean, this is not going to be an easy one to overcome. So we're going to have to look at different ways of doing it. So I appreciate that. So opportunities. Ski, snowboard, Doug Merrill, CTE shop. The equitable access to high quality academic, extracurricular, and real world experiences. So build the skills and knowledge of our staff under diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you can see in here the staff teacher practices provide each student with full access to grade level standards and beyond instruction and assignments. Now you're starting to see the connection back up to the big six. So what you'll see in the social emotional that Diana was talking about in thriving environments, you're seeing that in the big six. You're seeing how we're going to make that come to life. It's just not like hoping and wishing that those big six will come to life. It is literally through these practices in the different lenses that we hope everything comes through. Ensure grade level or beyond standards-based content instruction is consistently visible in the classrooms. So down to the school building. Observe and provide feedback to ensure grade level or beyond standards content and instruction is consistently visible in the classrooms. That our leaders are in classrooms. We're creating an environment where it's not this evaluative process, but a true feedback growth process, and that we're here to do this together. Provide training to support collaborative teams and scaffolded and differentiated learning. This is that big work around solution tree, WASA, around our professional learning communities. Again, we have really good teams. Our issue is we have to have them everywhere. We know the research around collective teacher efficacy. One of the highest effect size on student outcomes is about 1.53. But we have to create the structures and the systems for those actually to occur. So we're talking about this. At the district level, prioritize equitable, real-world, extracurricular experiences. In our system, currently, we have opportunities for certain kids based off of the building they go to. So we got to really look at those. To Laura's point and to the board's point in the earlier conversation, that's not an equitable opportunity for our kids to participate in things. Ensure that system structures, schedules, and staffing are really making sure that we have this equitable distribution to ensure that our kids continue to learn. And then provide observation and feedback tools to support our school leaders. This is how we see the DEI coming to life in our classrooms, in our schools, and throughout our district. Building the knowledge and skill that continues to ring true into that action step. This is our big belief that we have to continue to grow our classroom teachers, our school leaders, and our district leaders. That includes me as well. Develop a level of math or literacy content knowledge to be able to meet the needs of each student. That is in practice right now around literacy. And that's what Martin was speaking about around the math research group. We have to do better by our staff. We have to support our staff at a much higher level. It is never to be blaming our staff, it's to be growing our staff, it's supporting our staff. And that's what you see in this opportunity when at the school building level and the district. For the district, provide clear direction for instruction. What are we, and again, I'm going to just use the structured literacy as a great example. This is how we're going about this business. And again, ensure that all students have access to standards-based, high-quality literacy and math curriculum. So this, again, goes to the big six in both the areas of literacy, numeracy, on-track graduation. How are we going to get there? Here are our practices. And again, this will have a performance indicator to it. How will we measure this? Because that's what the board is ultimately going to want to hold us accountable to. One of their 3 values is the accountability of the organization. We're going to be reporting out on these, really speaking specifically to the practices and how they connect to the big six, how it connects to the promise, your values, and the priorities. Eliminating systemic barriers and obstacles for each student. This one's going to be really leaning into the equity audit. We don't want to go too far down this road until we have the equity audit completed. But it really is about, for us, conducting the system-wide equity audit and then using it to actually inform and then transform different areas. So that's under opportunities. I went through there quickly, so I'll just pause for a moment.
All right, moving on to partnerships, trusting relationships between students, staff, families, schools, and the community that enhance student well-being and success. So in this action step, we talk about teaming and collaboration. For staff, that looks like regular collaboration to meet each student's social, emotional, and academic needs, providing ongoing feedback to family regarding each student's progress. This was something that we saw this year that was so powerful, was the connection between families and staff to know how their students were doing. So that's something we want to continue. School and building leadership practice, really just supporting the effective teaming practices to meet those needs for our students and ensure that we have consistent implementation of the MTSS model, the multi-tiered systems of support. At the district level, it's providing professional learning and support, and then supporting implementation of a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Action step 2 under partnerships is engaging students, parents, and the community. For staff and teacher practices, this looks like building partnerships or continuing to build partnerships with each student's success in mind. Welcome community members into the learning environment, into our classrooms, into our buildings, and into our virtual classrooms. Actively engage and support students in sharing their voice. And this has been something that's been important to the board, and it's important for us to continue creating space in the classroom for students to share their voice and be engaged in learning. For school building and leadership, it's partnering with our parents, our guardians, and our community to support student learning. Again, during the pandemic, this was very evident, the crucial nature of these partnerships to do this. We can't do it alone. And it's incumbent upon our school and building leadership to really continue to cultivate those partnerships so that we can achieve those high student outcomes. Also providing regular and accessible communication to each family and the community. That's going to continue to improve. We're going to get better there. We've got a lot of ground to gain, and it's an area that we want to see improvement. District leadership and organizational practices is providing a plan and resources to support that two-way communication between parents and students that is, and staff, that is culturally responsive, and it's attentive to our students and families and community member preferences and needs. So we're using multiple vehicles for communication. And then developing a network of community partnerships that ensure student success. So again, it's continuing to cultivate those relationships and really tap into the wealth of resources and amazing organizations and individuals that we have in this community that want to come forward and support our students.
So I have a question or a thought to add. Regarding the phrase each student's success, I know we have some big 6 items and we're developing some key performance indicators. And when we do that, I see mention of graduation rate and 3rd grade reading level and so on. And it ties back into the idea, the concept of equity to have each student achieve their full potential, which is super important to me. Like we're not creating little toy soldiers coming out of the end product, right? So some people are going to go this way, some people are going to go that way. How do we measure that we have achieved the goal of springboarding those students into the best situation that they can be in? I think I'm not saying that very well, but for some students, it's going to be, having running start and high school graduation at the same time, and it's going to be going on to an Ivy League school. For other students, their success is going to be measured by entering the nursing program at Wenatchee Valley College. For some students, it's going to be entering, an automotive tech program, or for some students, it's going to be that they're immediately employed after, so there's this whole range of things. We're not producing, little buckets of ice cream that are identical when they come out. So when we use graduation rate or we use those kind of standard measurements, then it's I don't know, I think it feels like a limiting factor to me.
So we really thought about that. Thought about what allows kids to choose their pathways, to make all the choices that they want to make. And it's why we leaned into the big 6. Because what we know about the research on this is if kids cannot read and if kids cannot do math, there's so few opportunities in this world to make a living wage, to make a true living wage. And that's what we want our kids to be able to do. If you're able to do these pieces, stay on track for graduation, literacy and numeracy, be involved, and learn those social and emotional tools to be this, just a really functioning human. Those are the pieces that we know are critical. How we get there is making sure our classroom instruction is there. I think the other piece that speaks to where you're going to, Laura, are real world experiences. Having true career connected, and there's a link there that kind of defines that, but making sure our kids have different experiences, those internships, those opportunities at a younger age to be out in the field, to be going up to Saddle Rock, to see those experiences, but even more. I think it's one of those pieces that you hear from Jake in the CTE. from the middle to the high school? How do we have more of those hands-on opportunities and making sure that kids know that auto mechanic, it is a very great living wage job that allows you to make a lot of choices in your life. And to your point, wherever you want to go, what we should be able to do is you're ready. You can make choices. I feel like too often in most school districts, there's a subset of students who have choices. There's another set of students who don't really have choices. You graduate and it's go get some kind of job. And I don't know what that job is, but it's generally not a living wage job. It's generally you're having to work 2 to 3 jobs to earn something that actually allows you. I mean, I think about the rent in this area. Wow. So that to me is that living wage. And that honestly is what the forefront of my thinking. When a kid leaves WSD, can they get into a college, career, technical school, or can they go out and have a job that will allow them to have a life beyond just paying rent and then coming home and eating and having no other flexibility in their life? That's what I see. That's the promise that I want to deliver on.
Great. So how do we measure those things? How do we prove that we're providing that?
So that's where we're going to be reporting out on. We're going to be reporting out to the board on where our numbers are, just like we did. And take reading, for example. So on a regular basis, you're going to hear from us. Where are we at? Where have we grown in? And where are students achieving at? You will see the algebra ready percentages, how many kids and where we're at and what we're doing. That to me is the accountability. That's what you hold your one employee to, are these big 6 when we're reporting out. When our principals, when Mike and Corey and myself and others go out into our schools, when we're doing walkthroughs on a consistent basis, we're going to be coming back to the board and saying, we're seeing grade level, standards, instruction, and beyond in 80% of the classrooms. That's going to be a huge indicator for us. So the board will be constantly updated on our work around what we're doing, so we can measure that outcome. Laura, that's a great question.
Can I throw in a comment?
Yeah.
So I know you guys have mentioned social emotional kind of in some of these different stats. And I just wanted to, I know with COVID, we've kind of done some different practices. So for instance, some of our student grade levels, they had an advocate over the past year. Younger students had their own classroom teacher, but for students who were with multiple teachers, they had an advocate. And I don't know what the plan is, beyond the year we just finished. I really saw that as an opportunity to kind of bridge that gap with the equity piece that we just kind of spent some time talking about. So as a parent, I saw great value in it. As a board member, I appreciated that we were making those connections, particularly since we started the year in remote. But I think those connections paid off when we went back to in person. And so, again, I know this is not specifically part of the strategic plan, but I hope that we are looking at what have we learned, what was working, and how do we hope to carry those pieces that boosted our social emotional connections with our students particularly and the families. Even if they take a little bit of time, even if it's 10 minutes once a week, I just want to encourage the district that we're maintaining some of that. Because I've heard some concerns like, I don't know if we have time to do this, and I'm not going to name names or anything, but I hope that we can continue those social emotional connections so that students feel grounded like that first week of school. So
Yes,
I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate it. There is going to be time. We have a lengthy school day. We have time to do our social and emotional work. We know the importance of it. We cannot just keep doing lip service in some places and another a full in. It's that equity conversation about each kid having these opportunities to really learn about the social and the emotional and how important it is to grow as a young person into this thriving adult. It's those pieces, but that we're being consistent, that we're doing it. And that's where Mike and Corey being in our buildings. You've heard me countless times. However many times I'm with the board, we're always talking about, we can't lead from here. We have to be in our schools to know those things, to see those things, and to really make sure that we're monitoring them. And it's why we call it out here, that we see this work being done on a day-to-day basis for our students, for our adults too. Social emotional, as we learned through the pandemic, this is not just a young person issue. This is all issues around how do we do this work. And we also know when we take care of that, it also helps us on the academic side of the house too. When people are feeling good about them as a human, I can now do math and literacy a heck of a lot more when I have some of those basic needs met.
I was gonna add to Michelle's, because I think what was important and what I'm not hearing as much is that we're engaging the family or the advocate in the conversation as well, because I think that will help both our teachers feel supported in the classroom if they know that, you know, mom, dad, or if a student comes from a more diverse background, doesn't have support at home, that the teachers are aware of that, and can find support in the classroom so that they get the encouragement and the nurturing both inside and outside. I think that helps the teacher know that they feel supported. It will help the student know, and the earlier these interactions happen, the more likely I think the student success will perpetuate over time. So, you know, what I think what I'm not hearing as much is it's great, we're going to do this in the classroom with the students, but making sure that there's a constant feedback loop and engaging of the structure outside the classroom as well, so that these students leave and feel supported, come back, and the teachers likewise feel supported in what they're doing as well.
I appreciate that. I think one of the pieces that I should put on here as one of the caveats, this is that piece that's still really a draft. These ones are more draft. This is the one where our leadership team and then the staff, overall staff, will also give us real deep feedback here. We feel like we're in a pretty good place, but it's those types of tweaks that help us through the feedback loop really hone in on how to make it actionable. So thank you for that.
I think Julie's point, I think, oh, sorry, Michelle. Good. I think we learned that from our one-on-one parent-teacher conferences at the beginning of the school year. Those are super valuable for, I think, both the parents, the students to be engaged in it, and then for our teachers. You know, they spend a great deal of time throughout the day with our students. So I think that really definitely created a different tone, that one-on-one getting to know parents, teachers, because the reality is that some of our students don't have some are not going to be able to connect that loophole in a home environment for various reasons. So I think we also need to be aware of that. You know, it sounds great, but how do we educate our parents also to continue that circle when they're home as best as they possibly can?
So pre-COVID, I know that Westside has kind of done this for a while, right? So they have their students connect in small groups with a staff member, and it wasn't always necessarily a teacher, but again, I think it's that whether that person is making that weekly connection, or you're the quote advocate for the student in that building. I do think that is really powerful, and to expect our parents to be in charge of, I mean, I personally want to see the district be in charge to say, yes, you know, this is, your student is in this group, or your student is part of this advocate team, or whatever. You know, and I get at an elementary level, it might just be you're meeting with a teacher and maybe you're meeting before the school year starts or something. But I think those early connections, like Maria said, are so critical, you know, and then if we have students move in that second semester, then we're making sure that those kids are getting connected too. But I think that is a really important piece that we need to take away from this year. And it just ties in so much with all the social emotional work that we're doing, but I really hope that we can hang on to that. So
Thank you.
I'll stop talking.
No, you're good.
Yeah, and I think too, partnerships just in general, when we talk about student success, we have some great examples that, partnerships with Columbia Valley Community Health and Confluence Health to really address the social emotional needs of our students, our staff, and our families. And so kind of in that vein of developing those partnerships, we can't do this alone. We're not experts in a lot of things, but there are people in our community and our environment who are. And so, at the district level and at the building level, it's really important for us to have those relationships so we know who to go to when we need help or we need to refer students or families. So I think it's just continuing to develop that network was really something that emerged in the conversations with our staff when we were starting to put some kind of meat on these bones of how are we going to do this? There's definitely a clear understanding. Paul, can you take a step back? We missed one.
Oh,
So
sorry.
fiscal everyone's favorite. Fiscal responsible stewardship, just again,
No,
as
thank
it
you.
pertains to partnerships. This one was kind of tricky when we talked with our staff about how do we do this? What's their role in that? But staff practices are developing awareness of each student's resource needs. So this goes back to, does a student need tennis shoes? Does a student need a scholarship? What does the student need? And being aware of how there's community organizations that may be able to meet those needs. So it's just helping to connect families and students to available resources. Maybe it's something we have on site, whatever that is, so that we can eliminate finances as potentially being a barrier to participation. Advocating to provide needed school and classroom resources for every student. That's something teachers and our staff can do, whether you're the bus driver or the lunch lady. We really felt like that was something that we could all own and do. School building leadership practices ensure that our schedules and resources support our strategic plan priorities, because those have the potential of not, and really making our strategic plan not possible if we don't have schedules and resources to support that work at the building level.
From a micro level, this goes to what you were talking. This goes to what you were talking about. That our SEL curriculum being taught. It's in the right time. And to your point, that's how important these things are for us. The systems and structures really create those opportunities for kids.
The other thing as it relates to schedules is making sure that everybody has the same amount of time to do the same amount of things, whether that's science or SEL. So creating that systemic approach to our schedules. Prioritize and partner with others to remove financial barriers that hinder students' equitable access to opportunities. And that goes back to what I just talked about, whether it's scholarship or something else that is preventing a student from participating in athletics or otherwise that is financial related. It's having that network, knowing what those resources are at the building level, and really kind of owning that. At the district level, it is committing to being fiscally transparent. So that's with our budget, with everything that we do in that fiscal space, and then planning for future ready schools and district facilities. Future ready and district facilities were one of the things that emerged out of our early conversations with our stakeholders that was identified as both a strength, a weakness and an opportunity with some of our facilities. So really, as we begin making plans for the future as it relates to district facilities, just be very mindful of that.
So a point that just struck me in this phase is that this plan, parts of this plan, and I get that from the first section regarding staff and teacher practices, is the plan seems to be focused on shoring up those who are behind, who cannot, or who have not. And I just wonder if there's value in also being cognizant of students' resource needs for students who have extraordinary abilities or extraordinary potential. It seems to me that if we know students who have some really outstanding qualities about them, then it's not fair to that student not to provide resources to allow them to flourish as well.
Absolutely. I think along the lines of, like our counselor is working with all of our students to make sure that because it doesn't matter who you are, filling out college applications, filling out the FAFSA, doesn't matter who you are, that those are complicated opportunities. So each kid has an opportunity to be that future ready kid, whatever that looks like and those resources. But I appreciate that feedback, Laura.
I also have a quick comment on that previous one. And I'll pick on removing financial barriers. There are two kinds of financial barriers, and I've been a squeaky wheel recently on budget and ASB curricular activities. And I think that filling in forms or getting through a website is probably a bigger barrier almost than dollars and cents. So this is a system design thing for the school that not only should we be trying to do this, and I think Laura, by the way, not just extraordinary people, but people doing unusual things that are off the agenda cycles.
Yeah.
I think that is really good fun. But we should consciously, there's Ron over there, and I pat him on the back, and if he's website, but I think as an organization, thinking about how to make it easy and convenient, this would be for parents too, to apply for an advantage.
I love it. Again, great feedback to make the system work for each student. And that's literally what this is about. So here are our next steps. It's kind of the finalizing the framework, kind of that bigger, that top section that we talked about. And then really working on the work that we've just been speaking about, those action steps and those performance indicators. Want to have that done by August, early September. We'll bring the final plan to the board late September. My goal is that last meeting in September would be when it would be finalized. But every plan so far has always been like a little bit later. And then that rebranding out in November. But we still got a lot of heavy lifting to do. Again, the performance indicators and making sure the action steps and the performance, the practices are really in line with where we're going. My hope is that the board was able to see that through line that I talked about at the very beginning, from our promise to our values, to our priorities, into our action steps and into the practices. Again, the practices is where we're going to be doing more draft work over July, August, and then bringing that back to the board. And then the performance indicators themselves. So we've got a good portion of this close, but we're going to button it up with a lot of different feedback over the coming weeks and months to be able to bring a finalized plan, like I said, in that last week of September, early October. So that's where we're at for today.
I have one more comment, sorry.
No, you're good.
So, also what I feel could be a nice addition to this plan in terms of partnerships is speaking to kindergarten readiness. And what can we do in the community to help providers, preschool providers, daycare providers, families with small children, enhance their child's readiness to enter kindergarten.
Yeah, I think that's a nice one under partnerships, because that's really our role currently, as the state funding has us, is around making sure that we're strong partners in that area. But we can bring a lot of value to that conversation around especially early literacy and early numeracy, and what does that look like, but becoming even a stronger partner in that early literacy or early education, that pre-education. I see it.
To be a partner, but to be a leader in it, because it behooves us in the long run.
It does.
It will save us money in the long run if we have students who don't require remediation from day one.
Love it. Thank you. Board, thank you. I'll hand it back over to you, Laura.
Okay, I've got nothing.
All right.
So we will be back here tomorrow to talk about the budget. And we do have copious amounts of resource materials in our emails and our Google Drives to study and come prepared to discuss or hear about the intimate details of the school district budget tomorrow at 6 p.m. Stay tuned.
Thank you, everybody.
Adjourned. Here's that's for Michelle.
Thank you all. Great conversation, great feedback. Man, we're like, we know our time. 2:25.
Oh, I thought it
Bonus
was so
points.
great.